Imagine a China where the emperor still sits on the dragon throne, where ancient palaces remain centers of power, and where the red flag of communism never flew. In 1912, the Qing Dynasty collapsed, but what if it hadn't? The death that changed everything, Cixi's unexpected demise. September 21st, 1898, a date that, in our timeline, marked the beginning of the end for China's modernization hopes. But what if, on this fateful day, as Empress Dowager Cixi finalized her plans to crush the Guangzhou Emperor's reforms, fate had intervened? Imagine the scene. Cixi, 64 years old, suddenly clutching her chest, collapsing to the floor of her quarters in the summer palace as a massive stroke strikes without warning. By nightfall, the most powerful figure in China lies dead, and history veers dramatically onto a new path. In reality, Cixi's coup against Emperor Guangzhou succeeded. She arrested reform leaders, executed 6 without trial, and imprisoned the 27-year-old emperor until his death in 1908, extinguishing China's chance to modernize under imperial leadership. But in our alternate timeline, news of Cixi's unexpected death spreads through the Forbidden City like wildfire. The imperial court erupts into chaos, her conservative faction suddenly leaderless, while Guangzhou's supporters glimpse a miraculous opportunity. General Yuan Shikai stands at history's crossroads, commanding the powerful new army. This pivotal moment demands his choice: honor Cixi's final orders or pledge loyalty to the emperor. Without Cixi's promises of power, Yuan calculates his fortune lies with the legitimate ruler. The balance shifts decisively. Kong Yuwei and Liang Qiqiao remain as trusted advisors instead of fleeing to Japan. Young Liang, an intellectual prodigy, drafts proclamations establishing constitutional governance while the reform faction rallies around their emboldened sovereign. Guangzhou's vision transforms China through modern schools where Western sciences merge with Confucian classics. Newly established factories hum with activity, producing textiles and machinery previously imported at great expense. Military academies train officers in modern tactics while maintaining Chinese martial traditions. Constitutional reforms create provincial assemblies where merchants and scholars debate policy, gradually expanding representation while preserving imperial authority. These aren't foreign impositions, but carefully tailored adaptations suited to Chinese conditions. The emperor himself emerges from Cixi's shadow. Though physically frail, contemporaries note his keen intelligence and progressive outlook. After years of powerlessness, he must learn to wield authority decisively. International politics shift dramatically. Japan regards China as a serious competitor rather than easy prey. Britain increases investments in railway and mining, seeking a counterweight to Russian ambitions. Without the disastrous Boxer Rebellion and subsequent foreign occupation of Beijing, China retains both financial stability and national dignity during the critical early 1900s. Sun Yat-sen's revolutionary movement finds less support as imperial reforms deliver tangible progress. Many potential revolutionaries instead channel their energies into modernization from within, strengthening rather than overthrowing the Qing dynasty as it navigates the treacherous waters of the early 20th century. The Constitutional Dragon, reimagining China through global crises. As China's internal revolution shifted from violent overthrow to gradual reform, the real test would come from external forces. Would a modernizing Qing Empire, still led by an emperor claiming the mandate of heaven, have withstood the perfect storm of global upheavals that were about to engulf the world? The 20th century was waiting to test this new China with challenges no dynasty had ever faced. The Qing Empire would likely have evolved into a unique blend of Eastern imperial traditions and Western constitutional governance. Drawing inspiration from Meiji Japan's 1889 constitution, which successfully merged Western principles with traditional values, the Qing could have created a system far less authoritarian than what emerged under communist rule. This constitutional dragon would have been governed by a combination of bureaucracy, military leadership, and business interests, preserving the emperor as a unifying symbol while gradually distributing actual power. When World War I erupted in 1914, this reformed empire would have faced an impossible choice: maintain neutrality or align with a global power bloc. A neutral Qing might have supplied raw materials to both sides while building domestic industries. Alternatively, joining the Allied powers could have secured advanced French artillery and British naval technology to counter Japanese expansion in the Pacific, a strategic calculation with profound consequences for Asia's power balance. Japan had transformed from China's cultural student to modernized rival. A reformed Qing military might have incorporated German-style officer training alongside traditional martial disciplines, rebuilding once formidable armies with telegraph communicators and domestically manufactured rifles. Military institutions regaining strength under imperial patronage focused on national defense. Economically, the Qing faced a crossroads. Following Japan's industrial model would mean state-directed factories producing everything from textiles to locomotives, connecting distant provinces with railways while employing millions. This industrial backbone might have enabled China to weather the Great Depression through native financial institutions and stronger domestic markets, avoiding the hyperinflation that devastated Republican China in our lifetime. A stronger Qing military presence in frontier regions might have maintained imperial control over Tibet and Mongolia, territories once firmly within its 13 million square kilometer domain. These areas would have experienced fascinating cultural exchanges, traditional Buddhist monasteries perhaps adapting to operate alongside telegraph stations and modern administrative offices. Sadly, this alternative path would create unexpected consequences for village life across China, as Confucian education systems evolved to include engineering and science without the violent cultural ruptures of later revolutionary periods. This continuity between ancient traditions and modern innovations would produce a society dramatically different from the one shaped by revolutionary communism, the implications of which we'll explore in our next section. The Dragon Between Eagles, a Qing dynasty in the Cold War. A transformed Qing Empire, having weathered the storm of Japanese aggression, would have faced an entirely new global reality by 1945. The world was no longer divided by colonial empires, but split between two nuclear-armed ideological camps, American capitalism and Soviet communism. For an imperial dynasty that had survived millennia through careful diplomacy, this new bipolar reality posed an existential question. Where does an ancient empire fit into a world demanding everyone choose sides? The Qing would likely have gravitated towards strategic neutrality, similar to India in our timeline. The imperial court would embrace the principles of the non-aligned movement, extracting benefits from both superpowers while maintaining independence. Consider the experience of Lin Wei, a fictional imperial diplomat shuttling between Washington and Moscow in the 1950s, carefully balancing promises and avoiding entanglements that might compromise China's sovereignty, all while carrying the weight of 5,000 years of continuous civilization in his briefcase. The imperial structure itself would transform during these decades, gradually shifting toward the Japanese model. Emperors would serve as symbols of national unity, while genuine political power moved to an elected parliament. Unlike Japan's American-imposed democracy, the Qing might preserve more substantive authority, creating a hybrid system where emperors controlled foreign policy and defense while domestic governance became increasingly representative. Economically, the Qing would develop alternatives to communist planning. They would establish a model resembling South Korea or Taiwan, a state-directed capitalism with strategic investments in key industries. Without the Great Leap Forward or cultural revolutions, eastern coastal regions would industrialize while agricultural reforms proceeded gradually, avoiding Mao-era famines. Imperial patronage could evolve into business conglomerates similar to Korea's chaebols, family-controlled enterprises with government connections. Traditional Chinese culture would continue its natural evolution rather than facing systematic suppression. The court would position itself as civilization's guardian, preserving ancient traditions while cautiously embracing modernity. Temples, academies, and folk traditions would remain integral to social life, creating a landscape where tradition and innovation coexisted. In technology, the Qing would emphasize practical developments, infrastructure, shipbuilding, and precision manufacturing, similar to Japan's priorities. By the 1970s, Qing China might produce world-class consumer electronics rather than focusing primarily on heavy industry. As European empires retreated from Asia, the dynasty would position itself as the natural leader of newly independent nations. By the 1970s to 80s, when our timeline's China began economic reforms, the Qing would have already established a functioning market economy. Development would proceed more gradually, potentially creating a more balanced society with fewer stark urban-rural divides and more equitable prosperity distribution. The modern dragon throne, Qing China today. That gradual economic journey creates a fascinating paradox for our present day. In our world, China abandoned its ancient imperial traditions to modernize, but in this alternate timeline, those traditions became the very vehicle for modernization instead. Walking through the streets of Shanghai in 2023, you might glimpse imperial yellow banners fluttering alongside neon advertisements, while in Beijing, the emperor conducts ceremonial duties in a thoroughly modern Forbidden City. The modern Dragon Throne operates within a constitutional framework similar to Britain or Japan, with the emperor serving as a unifying figurehead above partisan politics. Government functions through a parliament and prime minister handling day-to-day governance, while the emperor retains ceremonial powers and limited actual authority in specific domains. This balance creates tensions between imperial authority and democratic processes, yielding a hybrid system where local governance embraces democratic elements while national identity remains anchored in imperial tradition. The bureaucracy, military leadership, and business elite form powerful alliances shaping national policy. Competing factions advocate for either expanding democratic reforms or preserving imperial prerogatives, creating dynamic political tensions unique to this Qing state. Economically, this China remains a manufacturing powerhouse with different patterns of development. Without the Communist Revolution's ruptures, economic evolution proceeded organically, creating a system resembling South Korea's state-guided capitalism, but with Chinese characteristics. Old gentry families transformed into modern business dynasties, leveraging centuries of accumulated wealth and connections, controlling vast commercial empires. A merchant in Suzhou might trace his family's silk business back 15 generations while managing global exports through a smartphone app. The distribution of prosperity is more balanced geographically, avoiding extreme urban-rural divides. The absence of collectivization spared millions from famine, while allowing developments to follow regional strengths rather than centralized planning. Foreign relations are shaped by historical memories of past humiliations. Anti-American sentiment influences diplomatic thinking, while France enjoys special status as a preferred Western partner. A Beijing university student might pause before an ancient monument to the Opium Wars before entering her international relations class, the past and present in constant dialogue. Technological developments follow a different trajectory without cultural revolution disruptions. Scientific research enjoys greater continuity, potentially leading to earlier breakthroughs in certain fields. Chinese society retains stronger continuity with its past. Without the one-child policy, demographic patterns differ dramatically. Traditional arts, philosophy, and religions evolved alongside modernity rather than experiencing ruptures. Family structures remain stronger, with extended family networks serving important social functions in both rural and urban contexts. On the world stage, the Qing project cultural influence as guardians of ancient traditions and imperial prestige, emphasizing continuity and historical greatness while engaging with global challenges like climate change through a blend of traditional philosophy and technological solutions. Conclusion. When we examine the Qing's collapse and China's subsequent path, we're reminded that history isn't a straight line marching toward inevitable outcomes. The communist revolution that transformed China emerged from specific choices and circumstances that could have unfolded differently. This insight challenges our understanding of global politics. A successfully modernized constitutional monarchy would have created an entirely different world map, economic system, and power balance. These historical thought experiments demonstrate that our present reality represents just one possibility among countless alternatives. How many pivotal moments in history turned on decisions we've forgotten? The answer shapes our understanding of both past and future. Stay tuned.